It's taken a while, but the truth about Stare, aka Starfield, is finally coming to light. Over the last few weeks, more and more people have been coming out with honest and sincere reviews covering Starfield, and these stand in stark contrast to the earliest reviews we had seen from people who had gotten early access to the game. This was and is, of course, a form of access journalism, meaning the people who receive early access copies are incentivized to give good reviews, regardless of the actual quality of the game. Whence the 10 out of 10 and 9 out of 10 scores given to Starfield initially, but reality has a way of intruding upon those who ignore it. A mediocre game cannot pretend to be a good game under constant scrutiny by those who are not incentivized to lie about its quality. Now, I did expect a lot of these reviews, but there was one reviewer that I had a lot of faith in, who's possibly the most reliable reviewer of RPGs out there, and he gave Starfield a very positive review. And maybe he was being honest, but I don't believe it. And the fact that possibly the most reliable game reviewer on YouTube felt compromised by the pressure exerted upon him by Bethesda actually infuriates me, and also motivates me to further pursue the matter of this incredibly mediocre game and the broader future of Bethesda games. But what am I speaking of when I talk about the truth coming to light? Well, given the fact that so many people were seemingly bamboozled by the game and the inauthentic reviews upon release, after playing the 70 gazillion hours people are told they need to play in order to properly appreciate the game, they are in fact coming to the conclusion that this game is very, very poor. So many features fail in this game, from travel to encumbrance to exploration to reactivity, that is impossible to ignore, which is why we've seen a gradual shift in the Steam reviews concerning Starfield. Starting off with mostly positive reviews, reviews on Steam have plummeted to mixed within the last month, currently sitting at 65% positive, and it's entirely possible that they will plummet still further. A game can only pretend to be good for so long, until the truth comes out. And now that regular people are finally adding their honest 2 cents to the mix, we're getting the reviews that we should have gotten from the get-go, from the compromised reviewers, who failed to deliver the truth about this insanely mediocre game. And without a shadow of a doubt, Bethesda's worst single-player game ever. But does this in fact matter? I ask this because it seems that what Xbox and Microsoft are really after are more and more Game Pass subscriptions. Gaming subscriptions are viewed as part of the future of many of these companies, as they provide regular, reliable income that, specifically in the case of Microsoft's Game Pass, exists independently of the quality of the individual games that are available on it. Starfield might be mediocre, but that is irrelevant, because whether someone plays it for 2 hours or 250 doesn't matter when they're paying a monthly subscription fee not tied to any specific game. And this is fairly alarming. Why is this alarming? It's simple. If the primary goal of Microsoft and Xbox going forward is to get as many people on board as possible to buy a Game Pass subscription, then they will be more inclined to forgo producing quality individual games. After all, what does it matter if Elder Scrolls 6 turns out to be pure schlock if legions of Microsoft acolytes are subscribed to Game Pass? The answer is, it matters little. I am, of course, speculating here. But in the wake of the exceptionally mediocre Starfield, every deflection offered by Phil Spencer has been one in which inevitably and invariably Game Pass is mentioned and how well Game Pass is doing. The positive Steam reviews could dip below the 50% mark, and it will still not matter if this is in fact the greater strategy of Microsoft and Xbox going forward. And based on the limited evidence available, I believe it is. Needless to say, this is yet another reason why the future is looking bleak for the Elder Scrolls 6. Because by then, I fully suspect the marketing investment and energy to have been massively increased to advertise and support Game Pass. I even have friends telling me how great a deal Game Pass is. And in some sense, it is. However, if my theory is correct, it comes at the expense of other things. So I'll repeat one last time as clearly as possible. Monthly subscriptions are reliable, guaranteed revenue that single-player games, whatever their quality, can almost never replicate. So why bother making an effort when you can just convince people en masse to subscribe to Game Pass? They'll simply end up getting lost in the morass of games, whether they're good or not. The main point is that they pay their monthly fee. In still more recent news, Bethesda's legendary PR man, Pete Hines, now former Senior Vice President of Global Marketing and Communications, has resigned from his position and abandoned his alliance with Bethesda. This could have absolutely nothing to do with the release of Starfield, but it also could have something to do with the release of Starfield. It hasn't even been 2 months since the release of the game, and if that weren't bad enough, a veteran Bethesda lead quest designer by the name of Shen is leaving the studio after nearly 15 years. He'll be joining up with Something Wicked Games to work on Weirdsong, their up-and-coming RPG. Now again, we have to speculate here, but even if Starfield were not causal in this case, it's really bad optics to leave at this juncture in time. Something is probably amiss, even if we don't precisely know what that something is. And all this points to, as I discussed previously, a very poor basis for the making of Elder Scrolls 6. And to briefly turn to Mod Howard, as I want to call him these days, and this is only my opinion, he hasn't been a positive influence on Bethesda games. Yes, he's given credit for the creation of Skyrim, largely. But we need to be honest here. Skyrim's success was a complete fluke. No one, not Mod Howard, not Pete Hines, not even the gods themselves, knew that Skyrim would turn into the success story it did. To be sure, now Mod Howard talks about 10-year cycles for single-player games, but this is purely a consequence of luck. Had Skyrim not become the game it became, there would be no such rhetoric. It's likely this mindset that in part led to the creation of Starfield, a mile-wide, inch-deep game, in the hope that somehow it would have the same appeal and longevity as Skyrim. But a vast empty universe set in a strange NASA punk-style genre likely won't cut the mustard here. Skyrim was probably a one-off. It might have been Fallout 76 that first set off the alarm bells in people's heads, but it seems even more likely that Starfield will be the final nail in the coffin for Bethesda open-world games. In summary, if Game Pass subscriptions are the primary goal of Microsoft, rather than well-made games, and people are leaving, such as Pete Hines and Shen, right after the release of Starfield, then it does not bode well for Bethesda games. Now let me offer you a final, positive counterfactual. Maybe Microsoft sees that Starfield's reception over time is very poor, and subsequently puts pressure on Bethesda to give it their all for Elder Scrolls 6, since they want a runaway hit, rather than the lazy slop they gave us with Starfield. Maybe this will trigger Mod Howard to really get back to his roots, and force him, along with his entire team, to make a proper game. One can only hope, but frankly, I rather doubt it. In the end, Skyrim might end up going down in history as the fluke it likely is, a one-hit wonder in a sea of trash that emerged in subsequent years. I desperately hope I'm wrong on this one, but somehow I'm uncharacteristically confident in my prophecies this time around, which is foreboding indeed.